online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hello and welcome to today's Battle Mech review. Today we're going to be looking at the Longbow, which is a classic in its own right, even though a lot of people don't quite know it as well as some of the more traditional ones like the Archer or the Warhammer or the Griffin. The Longbow has a weird history and a weird history of upgrades and downgrades, and even though it was produced everywhere in rather large amounts, it never made an impact on the psyche like some of those other mechs I just mentioned. It is a decent to great fire platform, and it supported all sorts of formation throughout its entire history. And it's one where I'm going to have to keep saying, like, they changed the engine, and they changed the engine again, because there never was a fix idea of what a Longbow should be able to go at in terms of speed. So let's get into it. The Age of War was starting to wind down as battle mechs were being introduced, but they were still a key part of that era. The late 25th century started bringing out those bipedal weapons to the front, and a lot of them were going to be used as battering ram against enemies' conventional armor formation. Penetration on a armored mech is usually about 1 in 36. That's about what you get when you get hit by a modern weapon. While you're fighting a tank, armor penetration is generally much higher just because of how they're set up and how the plating is done. The first thing that really took the front were the various trooper mechs, your Mackies, your Emperors, your Banshees. I would enter the Ymir in that particular category as well. Mechs that were meant to be battering ram. Yes, some of them had more long-range weapons, some of them had more close-range weapons. They were a little bit all over the place. People didn't really know what you were meant to do with a mech at the time, but they weren't meant to be anything super special or super fancy. They were there, they were going to punch holes in enemy formations, and you were going to win the day. The very early Kudo gave us an idea of what the next things the engineers were going to tackle in the Terran Hegemony and in what the Inner Sphere wanted, something to support those big heavy troopers. You add smaller troopers coming out with the Orion in 2456 as an example, but a lot of the mech in that era, if you start looking at the various design specs, really exist to protect the larger troopers and take out targets at longer range, or at closer range. In the case of a thing like the Commando, it's going to support the big Mackie by getting into it directly with an enemy rather than staying in the back. One of the fun one was the Elopolis, something like that, that tried to do it with actual artillery. This one was a sniper cannon mounted on a mech rather than on a vehicle. It worked, kinda. But it became more sensible to use long-range missiles, which were kind of already of a standard, with things like the crossbow and the fairly ubiquitous Archer. And here comes Luckenberg-Holley Industries. We know Holley nowadays mostly for the fact that they produce the standard missile launchers, SRMs, MRMs, LRMs, all the M's, basically. But they're also the ones that basically made those standard. You can pretty much get an SRM rack, put it in a mech, and just buy SRMs on the market, and they're going to fit because Holley is the company that decided that the missiles are going to look like this, they're going to be that long, and they're going to be that efficient. In 2480, they were still Luckenberg-Holley Industries, and that was right before they merged with a bunch of other interests in order to create the mega corporation, Starcore. They had a massive budget already, and they were working on designing something to compete with the Archer using their standard launchers in order to cash in on the trends of bipedal weapons. Released in 2480, the LGB-0C Longbow started the trend of the design with an 85-ton machine with large barrel arms, in order to give you a wider range of fire, including behind you if you flip the arms over. While those were less protected than the chest launchers on an Archer, this was a valid trade-off that many agreed with. The original design used a primitive technology, as most designs of that time, but I mean, you were really at the cusp of having the more modern stuff coming out as well, so it was probably a bit of a late bloomer. You used the 310 engine in order to reach speed of 54 kilometers per hour, and you were protected by 13.5 tons of standard plates, cooled by 15 heat sinks, which is quite decent. For equipment, it was very, very simple. Each arm carries a 20 rack of ollie launchers, LRMs in this case, with 6 full tons of munitions packed in everywhere, which allows you to have extensive bombardment capabilities, which was not super frequent on mechs at that time. At closer range, you add a medium laser in each side torso and a small laser mounted in the head, well, under the head. You can see it in that picture there. It basically keeps your feet warm. The biggest problem of the design is really that it was quite fragile, because primitive armor is really not that good, and you're not going to be able to outrun most of your predators, which would be commandos in this case, or a couple of other light mechs. You might be able to outshoot them, but you've got nothing in your back, you're not able to jump, you're not that quick. It is a little bit of a risky machine. The Longbow was incredibly popular and became a standard product for the brand new Star Corps. It was also very, very popular with the Free Worlds League military, where you saw a lot of them back then, and you still see a lot of them nowadays. It was also incredibly popular with all the periphery state, because Star Corps really doesn't care where the money flows, and they just care if you have a bank account and you are not in debt with them. Evolution with the technology led to the creation of the LGB-0W pretty quickly in 25-29. It might sound like a long time nowadays, but back then, developing new mechs and using the new technology took quite some time. And this thing was the standard design during the War of Star League aggression. Armor was incredibly thin, with only 9 tons of it, but it was only cooled by 13 heat sinks. What it did have, though, was a much larger engine, a 340 Fusion, giving it a top speed of 64 kilometers per hour, allowing it to match things like the Archer. As far as equipment goes, well, the barrel arms are still there, but they are supplemented by a pair of 5-rack LRMs in the side torsos, but those are made by Delta Rack rather than Holly, because Star Corps needs to be able to spread the money around. The 20 racks are fed by 4 tons of ammo, and the 5 racks are fed with 2 tons of ammo, and you have a small laser in the head in order to have I was going to say a lot of protection, to scare off maybe, a gazelle or something if it gets too close. There were complaints about the tin plating on the darn thing, so someone made a side grade with the 0W2, which removes that small laser and a ton of LRM reload to give you a 1.5 tons more armor. After the reunification wars were done and the glory days of the Star League, Earthworks released the LGB-7Q, which was the standard for the design until actually after the Succession War. This one uses a downgraded 255 Fusion, giving you a top speed of 54 kilometers per hour, which is enough for an assault mech in the support category. You get 14.5 tons of plate, which is far more reasonable, and 22 heat sinks in order to be able to shoot just about everything all the time. You keep the 4 racks of LRMs from your 0W, so you get 4 tons of 20-rack LRM reloads and 1 ton of 5-rack LRM reload, which should be enough. And for close-range protection, you get a pair of medium lasers in the side torsos. See, this one here starts at a very good price point, and it looks fairly well. Depending on the body kit, this one here is pretty good. You're going to see like 100 different body kits for longbows throughout this video, to be honest. And you're well protected if something gets close by. Well, not super well protected, but this is mostly used during the Succession War, where 2 medium lasers could actually make a pretty big difference. So this one here didn't see that many upgrades or side grades outside of personal reworks by different people. There was one variant which came out in 2615 with the LGB-0C. This one is actually a pretty straightforward modification and probably something that was done off the market for a while. Star Corps just started building their own. 2 of the heat sinks are removed, and they add 2 rear-firing medium lasers in order to protect you a little bit better, which is not entirely terrible, until you realize that the pilots are going to flip those to face forward to give them 4 medium lasers to shoot forward. At that point, you're going to have a decent amount of punch if something decides to walk in front of your longbow, but you're going to be just as exposed in the back. Really, that was it for the Succession War and the entire Star League era and quite some time. Those were the longbows you add. 0Ws, or the 0W2, 7Qs, 8Cs, and those are the ones that were built and all around the place. There was no real fancy tech in them. They could keep building them with downgrades to technology and not being able to make Endo Steel and XL Engine. They really didn't care. Those 3 models didn't use any of that. There's a line in one of the logbooks here and the technical readouts that said something like only 2 factories remain in 3039 that were building longbows. That's actually 2 more than most mechs during that era. This goes to show. Even with the recovery of the Helm's Memory Core, there was no new longbow that were slated for production. The first actual new longbow came out after the Battle of Tukeyid with the LGB-0C in 3056. They do a lot of changes on this one. They set up an XL engine and replace the heatsink kit with double heatsinks, and you get 16 tons of full plates for protection. In order to be better protected, you use some of that saved weight to put in 5 medium pulse lasers and an ER large laser in the center torso. That's a whole lot of lasers on a missile boat. You also have the 5 rack LRMs taken out, and the Artemis guidance is added to the 20 rack LRMs. It's a very decent support machine. You have less LRMs to shoot, but those LRM-5s are not always the best thing ever. And you do have a whole lot of punch with all of those pulse lasers, but then again, they're medium pulse lasers, really not my favorite. The ER large laser is a nice addition, however. The longbow was also part of Project Phoenix, which revamped a whole lot of mechs in the early 3060s. The first one is a sensible upgrade, the LGB-0C, which uses a standard engine, but 14 double heatsinks to keep cool. Both the racks of LRMs, the 20s and the 5s, are now tied to Artemis guidance, and the ammo is kept in case bins. The front and the back are now protected as well with ER medium lasers. It's entirely sensible. Like I said, it doesn't do anything super fancy, but it's going to do what a longbow is meant to do and do it better than the original models. For something a little bit less sensible, Project Phoenix also released the LGB-0C with an XL engine in order to save on weight. Your only close-range weapon in this case are a trio of ER small lasers, 1 in the head and 2 in the center torso. So what do you use to save the weight for? Well, you put Artemis guidance on the launchers, and what you replace the 5 racks with is another 15 rack of LRM instead. So you get to 2 20 rack LRMs, 2 15 rack LRMs, 5 tons of reloads for the 20s, 4 tons of reloads for the 15s. So you're going to be staying around quite some times until something gets, close to you, and you have to try to scare them off with pea shooters. It's a very decent setup for a fire support machine as long as it has a couple bodyguards. Around that same time, the Marian Hegemony figured out that they had a whole lot of longbows because they had been raiding the Duchy of Tamarin and all sorts of other Free Worlds League powers and worlds over the years. What they decided to do was go with something extensively sensible with a 340 fusion and make the LGB-0H, which has a top speed of 64 kilometers per hour and 11 double heatsinks. Your main weapons are actually a pair of PPCs in the side torsos where you normally have the 5 rack LRMs. And then you stick 260 rockets on it for a massive one-time punch. Hail Caesar, all that's good stuff. I mean, it's funny. It works fairly well in that one-time massive deletion button kind of thing. Just make sure your pilots are able to shoot them and then exploit those PPCs for the rest of the battle. In 3068, the LGB-8V came out, and this one was meant to be a true artillery platform. This one uses the 255XL engine in order to give you enough speed to get into position to fire your big artillery missiles, which are a pair of Aero 4 artillery platform with 8 tons of reload. So this one you just keep very far from the front line and you keep pressing the button. At close range, it still defend itself using an ER large laser and a pair of medium pulse laser. It's not the best Aero 4 platform out there. I prefer tanks to be carrying artillery rather than battle mech. But if you look at some battle mech, there's a few different ones in the inner sphere in the clans that carry Aero 4s and can be quite surprising. There is a tiny number of LGB-13 Nice which were built over time, and they keep popping up for repair around here. This one is really weird. It uses an endosteel chassis, which no other longbow really uses, and 16.5 tons of standard plates with a 255 engine to go at the regular speed. For weapons, what you have is a 6-twit, something like that, light autocannon 5 in the barrel arms fed by 7 tons of specialty ammo. Sure, you can use standard ammo with it, but with that much ammo on that small caliber of autocannon, you can easily load your flak, your precision, your armor piercing, and anything else you might want to think of, and fire them at any target that gets close by. For defense, you've got a Guardian ECM in the center torso and an ER small laser for emotional support, along with a pair of medium lasers mounted in the knees, with B-pods to protect you against battle armor. It has a little bit of everything. It tests all sorts of new technology, or at least new technology at the time. It's quite weird for a longbow, but it is surprisingly efficient. In 3070, the LGB-13C goes pretty hard with a set of multi-missile launcher which had just came out. This one uses 6 Doombud MML-7 with Artemis guidance, allowing you to do an okay amount of bombardment or basically blow up anything that gets close to you. With 6 tons of reload, you're going to be fairly flexible. I've seen people just do the regular 3 tons of LRM, 3 tons of SRM, but more often than not, when I have to set up a 13C, it's going to be something like 4 tons of LRM because it's going to try to stay in the back anyways, and 2 tons of SRM in case something gets close and needs to be deleted. You get 3 ER small lasers in case you run out of ammo or something gets close and you want to extra delete it. And you do get 12.5 tons of standard plates to protect you, which is decent enough, in that larger 340XL engine, allowing you to be decently fast. Cooled by 12 double heat sinks, if you start shooting everything all the time, you might start feeling the heat, but it's not that terrible. There were other versions of the MML longbow that came out literally in the same year. This one is the LGB-14C, which uses 6 9-tube rack of MML with 10 full tons of reloads. Once again, a lot of people will go with more heavily on the LRM side and just keep a few tons of ammo for the SRM. With 9 tubes, this goes pretty quick, so you do have to be a little bit careful. And this one for protection has a trio of ER medium lasers for medium range engagement, and you're cooled by 10 double heat sinks, which is really not enough if something gets close by and you try to shoot everything. You get a DAT 255XL to give you the speed of 54 kilometers per hour, and you get 14 tons of case enhanced plates in order to keep you protected. So if the ammo goes, well, the mech is destroyed, but you can probably salvage it. In 3088, the LGB-14C2 came out as an upgrade kit for this previous model, with the cockpit being replaced with a small cockpit. You also dropped 2 of the ER medium lasers, so what do you use that saved weight on? Well, this one actually features a boosted C3 slave unit to allow the longbow to share telemetry while it's not being blocked by an ECM system. Boosted C3s are pretty fun for that. Even if the enemy shows up with a ECM, it's not going to do what it should, but it's a very big investment for something that is fairly situational. There's still not enough C3 master units and C3 boosted masters on top of that to really make this a worthwhile investment. It is something that came out. A lot of people probably used it while it was available. And you've got 3 tons that you can probably strip that C3 slave out of and replace it with more ammo or something more worthwhile. The really modern version, I would say, the one that is fairly common for just about everyone to buy, is the LGB-14R. This one you will find in various yards, and you will be able to order from the manufacturer, basically. This one was built for the Republic of the Sphere and their allies, and it's fairly efficient. It uses a light 255 engine, so you save on some of the weight, but it's not as risky as the XL that's in many of the modern models. And you've got 13.5 tons of case-enhanced plates, so if the ammo goes, well, the mech can actually go back home on its own power. For weapons, what you have is 8 tons of reload for a set of 4 racks of 15 LRMs, allowing you to have very massive bombardment capability and being probably one of the more efficient ones in the process. For direct fire, you have an ER large laser and an ER medium laser, giving you an okay defense. You also get 3 jump jets in order to do some rapid repositioning for you to be able to shoot those efficiently. Everything on this particular design is smart, and it is the one I recommend people buy at the moment. There is another rebrand here with the 3103 LGB-14Q, which is basically a retread of your original Longbow. It gets that 340 XL engine to go up to 64 kilometers per hour. You get 12 double heat sinks to try to protect you. And you get 16 tons of case-enhanced plates, but those are case 2, so even if the ammo goes, well, the explosion goes backwards rather than inwards. So it's going to be fairly well protected nonetheless. For weapons, you get that pair of 20 rack LRMs in the arms, typical. But those are backed by 5 tubes and racks of MMLs in the shoulders, which are very nice to have. It's going to give you a decent amount of punch if someone gets close by. You're going to have the same amount of firepower at long range. I'm perfectly fine with that. You also have a pair of ER medium lasers pointing forwards and backwards for extra protection. Knowing Mechwarriors, they're going to flip those forward, but you know how it is. The final modern version of the Longbow came out in 3105 with the LGB-14V. This one is a little bit odd because it doesn't focus on LRMs. It actually has a pair of Apollo-guided MRM-20s in the arms, while the shoulders still have those 5 rack of LRM. I'm never a huge fan of MRMs. Here, they're going to be okay. I mean, they're large enough barrels, and with Apollos, you're going to be as accurate as regular missiles. You have an okay range on them, but that means that you're going to be bringing that Longbow out for a brawl. To back things up, each side torso is a light PPC, while they also have a rear-facing ER medium lasers that everybody's going to forward. With an engine, which is a 340 XL, giving you that 64 kilometers per hour speed, you are going to be able to go into a brawl, and the armor is protected by case, meaning that if the ammo goes, you're still good to go. This is an odd setup for a Longbow, but I think it's going to work. Maybe I would make some small modifications to it, put MML5s instead of the LRM5s, switch the light PPCs for regular ER medium lasers. There's things I might move around if I have one brought into the shop and someone says, like, can you make it a little bit better, or can you make it a little bit of a better brawler? I might have some options for them. I personally don't have a refit for the Longbow. That Republican Longbow is generally the one I recommend people get because it's just good enough for what you need it to do. There's some odd things you can move around. There's some people asking me for custom jobs. You can do a lot of things with a Longbow, but the standard versions are generally what you want them to be, outside of maybe that 13 nice one, which is just completely odd for a Longbow. When one shows up for repair, I need to make sure that I have 255s, 340s, XLs, not XLs, light engine. I need to make sure I've got a lot of parts ready, unless the people actually tell me, yeah, it's a stock 12R. Then it's easy for me to fix. For fire support units, often enough, you want something that's just well suited for its need and what it's meant to do. A lot of people are going to try to customize their own fire support unit, removing what makes them special. There's no end to the ones that have been modified by people. I am sure someone out there has one with multiple PPCs. There's probably one with a drone dispenser and the old style ECM. Who knows, really? I've even seen a Longbow made to carry battle armor. I mean, it worked. Not very well, but it worked. So you've got a variety of things you can do with a Longbow. Just find the one that you need if you're buying one, and remember that it's meant to be a fire support unit and should stay in the back. Don't try to go brawling with it. So I hope everybody has a very nice rest of their day. I thank you for listening to me for so long, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.